This video tutorial features working with zonal statistics within ArcGIS, and oftentimes we'll want to summarize roster values in terms of either analysis mask in roster format or a feature class, a shapefile, oftentimes a polygon shapefile. And what we'll want to do is we'll want to summarize per something in our second mask layer. Okay, so to get started, we're going to be using Pakistan digital elevation, and we're using an administrative polygon as the mask here. So to get started, we need to make sure that we have the extension turned on, which is Spatial Analyst. So if I go to Customize, I need to make sure my extension's turned on. It is. I'm going to go to our toolbox, and under our toolbox at the very bottom under Spatial Analyst Tools, I'll see Zonal, and here's where we're going to be working. So we can see that we have many different options here. We're going to be producing a zonal statistic and then also a zonal statistic as a table. So if I click on Zonal Statistics, here's where we're either going to input our roster, our analysis roster, or a feature zone. So in this case, I want it to be my administrative boundary, so I'm going to click on my administrative boundary. And importantly, I want to have a field that I'm going to be summarizing, or I'm going to be collecting these statistics. And it makes sense in this case to do it on the name. So each one of these administrative areas has its own name as a unique identifier, so we'll use that. Now the input value is going to be the actual DEM itself. So that's going to be, I have that's called project roster 2 here. And my output roster now, I'm going to send it to default geodatabase, and I'm just going to call it stat test underscore stat test. And here I really can only collect one statistic coming back. So I'll just collect the median value. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying I want the median value per administrative boundary for this pretty complex DEM roster set. So I'll go ahead and say OK. And when it runs, it's going to produce in this case, a roster that's going to have now discrete values per administrative boundary that represent that median value from the original roster. So in this case, we can see down here in the send, if we click off our stat test, we only have a little bit of difference right at the edge here in the lower west of send. We can see that there's a little bit difference, and the rest of it's pretty much the same value. It's a very flat planar area. So it's returning a median of 47. It's basically very close to sea level. And we can see as we go up towards the northern areas that are extremely high in elevation and quite a bit of elevation change, we're going to see a very high value. So that's basically summarizing per administrative boundary at a median statistic what's happening in our DEM. So that's valuable as just kind of a one-off, but oftentimes what we'll want to do is if we go back and run these as a table, we can see we have a little bit more flexibility. So we're going to input the mask. So in this case, it's going to be our administrative boundary again, and I'm going to make sure that I'm using something that's going to uniquely identify each one of those features in my data set there. So in this case, it'll be the name. I'm going to output it. I'll just call it table test, table underscore test. And my statistics types now, instead of just picking one, I can pick all of them. So I'm just going to have it return all, and I'll say OK. It didn't like the fact that I didn't specify the roster, so I'm going to make sure that I'm specifying my DEM roster, and I'll say OK. And there we go. So let's go into our table of contents and see what we got back. So now if I open up this table here, I can see that I have a name 1, and importantly, if I want to, I can join it. So let's just go ahead and do that real quickly. So we would do a join. So I'm going to join based on name 1. And I'm going to do it in my table tests, and I'll validate the join. I'll keep all the records. Looks 8 to 8. I'm okay. Interesting, it threw an error there, but it still did okay. And let's go ahead and map this thematically. So let's go ahead and go to symbology, and I'm going to go to quantities, and I want to map the, let's say, the mean of these. So I'll go ahead and say apply, okay, and then I can see my mean values. So here I'm at the low end, I'm 67 to 233, which makes sense because those are lower elevation, and here up at the northwestern frontier I'm at a very high elevation. So that gives us a nice summary. But importantly, if I go to this attribute table now, I do have in the attribute table all these statistics that are returned back for the actual roster itself. So I'm basically transporting these statistics that were in the original roster that were kind of unwieldy because they're in a continuous surface and there's no way to really summarize those. So now we've summarized them based on our polygons, and of course those polygons could be completely different. They don't have to be the ones that we're using here. They don't have to be the administrative boundaries. They could be many different features that could be the mask or the feature that we use as the input. Okay, so hopefully this helps to get familiar with zonal statistics, and two places that are very powerful, which is just running a zonal statistic based on or I should say returning a roster classed set that comes back to you that has just one statistic in it. And then the other one is zonal statistics as a table. It's basically going to give you a tabular format, and of course that's really easy to then join to your original geometry that you inputted into the zonal statistics. So good luck with this, and hopefully this is helpful to introduce summarizing based on zonal statistics.